This week on Entrepreneurs, we're talking about family business. I'm Jack Delosa, and Entrepreneurs starts now.
This is Entrepreneurs.
Welcome to Entrepreneurs. Tonight we are keeping it in the family. Family businesses account for a staggering 70% of all businesses in Australia, but how do they work on a practical level? There's a lot of dynamics at play. Joining the dots for us tonight are a panel of family business owners, experts, advisors, investors, you name it. We're going to kick off with two people who have worked with a lot of family businesses over the years. David Kenny, a startup investor, mentor, and a partner at accounting firm Hall Chadwick, and Tom Alice from Melbourne, who is a startup advisor and the founder of Pebble Ventures. David and Tom, welcome to Entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Jack. How are you?
Good, good. Now, David, you wear many hats as an advisor, mentor, angel investor. Tell us about your background with family business.
Well, I guess I started working in a chartered accounting firm 30 years ago, but quickly discovered that the most important thing to these people was really strategy and what do they do next. So that's been my focus, particularly for the last 20 years, and working with some smart people out of universities that were building technology and needed help in commercialising things. And it's just flowed on from there, helping people scale and build companies.
David, benefits of being a family business?
I think the key one is really having that control of the destiny, being your own boss, etc. And sometimes it depends on the type of business you want to grow. I mean, how big do you want it to be? Do you want to hire staff? Do you want no staff? And are you trying to become an owner versus the most highly on-demand 24/7 person? So family business is all about control and being able to build a legacy and pass something on to the next generation. And just keeping wealth in the family, and that's pretty big part of the Australian ecosystem.
Yeah, and I would imagine it would be such an interesting dynamic. I mean, you've got family dynamics at play, you've got business dynamics at play, you've got financial dynamics at play. What are some of the unique challenges that come with family business?
Well, there's no one thing. There's people are quirky, and how
particularly with family, right?
Particularly with family, there's different dimensions and dynamics. But some of the key ones are really making sure that people set objectives, get on the same page, because there's more at stake if there's an argument. And wanting to really look at objective measures on how they agree what they'll do, and getting on the same page is probably just that much more important. No one wants to sue their family members. But there's lots of good examples out there of companies that have managed to do that very well, obviously, and there's plenty of them around that have done very well, and I've been lucky enough to come along the ride on some of them.
And Tom, what about you? I would imagine you've seen some incredible successes throughout your career as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've sort of had a mixed career over the last 10 years of being a banker to many of the families that we sort of talk about and see on those lists around the most aspiring families, and also then working in and around family offices for the last sort of 3 to 5 years, and sort of seeking some of those people as an equity and debt provider. So it's been a really interesting journey, and albeit just starting, but I think probably the overarching theme is people, value and growth, and that's really something I've seen across whatever instrument or company, that alignment back to the family, their values, and really what story they're trying to tell. And that's where I've seen the biggest alignment and synergies for great companies.
And Tom, if I pose the same question to you that I did to David, there would be interesting benefits. There would also be incredibly interesting challenges, I imagine. Can you speak to both of them for a minute?
Yeah, so benefits for me, I think, having worked in and with amazing families, both from a wealth perspective, but also from legacy and vision. I think that the benefit is that if you're in those businesses working with those teams, you are part of the family. And then sort of to the challenges, it's that you're not part of that family. Or if you're a family member, that things like succession become really complex. You're having a conversation with a family over a Sunday dinner or at a family board, and that may really have a very different impact on your day-to-day role in that business that's ultimately owned by the family. So I think some of the biggest challenges I've seen are around succession planning, and to the point earlier, not looking ahead to what the group is trying to build. And I think that's where you end up with sort of divergence of interest and points.
Yes. A question for both of you, David. I might start with you. Working with spouse, I mean, it sounds utopian perhaps to the untrained eye, but what are the red flags?
Well, I think it's the same thing with there's just more at stake, and there's plenty of ways to get that right. And I think a lot of people hear it's the typical thing, don't do that. But getting the formula right can be very, very successful. Lots of good examples of husband-wife combinations that have built great companies. I mean, one of probably the best ones is I think companies like Envato and obviously Mel. Yeah. And Cliff, from Canva.
Yep.
So it's very doable. It's just getting the formula right and that combination, and making sure that people aren't thinking this is a nepotism company. It's a real fair dinkum. Quality will rise, and there's no glass ceilings here for you if you're not got the right surname.
Tom, David mentioned getting the formula right. What do you think are some of the ingredients in getting the formula right when it comes to spouse partnerships?
I think that two of my friends are spouses in companies together, and they've found that really setting boundaries to communication and making sure that the sort of the work component ends and then the family component starts, and really having that respect for space. And I've seen a really great wellness business. There's a husband and wife team there. They're a powerhouse couple. They sort of really identify each other's roles and are clear where one starts and one stops. Yeah. And they sort of use their trip home as a third place to break the home and work environment. That's working really well for them. I think also having clear mechanisms around, are we checking in, hey, are we still going in the same direction? Are we still aligned? Much the same as any company, like that check-in around, are we still doing this for the right reasons? If I'm not leaning in, why? And really having those open discussions. I think that's absolutely critical. Otherwise, you can end up with a business and or personal relationship breakdown. Unfortunately, I've seen a bit of both, but I've also seen them strive onto great things. And David, I imagine you'd be similar.
Totally. I mean, if you don't get those ground rules right, it's a very sad family event, and getting other family members dragged into arguments is not a good look. So it's about making sure that you have all the right ingredients from a governance point of view, and just common sense is usually the right approach. Is just make sure that is it the best type of business in terms of practices, systems, operations, and set the bar high, and so no compromises because they're related.
One challenge I've seen a few times though is if there's sort of 3 or 4 people involved, and there's a husband and wife and others, and there's either a breakdown in the business relationship or the personal. So I've been involved in a situation where one of the spouse passed away, and it was a really, really messy situation where they were kind of not aligned as a group. It was really ended up creating a very, very difficult situation. So I think that structure, the open dialogue, and that alignment piece, that's the make and break for any business, but especially when you've got a spouse team involved.
Spot on, yeah, totally.
Tom Ellis, thank you so much for joining us from Melbourne. We appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Great to chat, Jack.
Thank you very much. David, thanks for coming on, but we will have you back later on in the show.
Thanks, Jack.
Appreciate it. When we return, we are talking to Sue Ismail, founder of one of the iconic Aussie brands, Nad's Hair Removal. That is also a family business. Coming up next.
You're watching Entrepreneurs. Welcome back to Entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to Entrepreneurs. We are focusing on the practicalities of partnerships and family business. We are joined by Sue Ismail, the founder of 28-year-old business Nad's Hair Removal. Sue came from Syria to Sydney as a 15-year-old with her parents and siblings, going on to build a household brand name and growing a $40 million consumer business that exports around the world. Sue, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
It's a pleasure, Jack.
Good to have you here. Now, talk to us about Nad's Hair Removal. Why did you start that?
Well, they say necessity is mother of invention.
Innovation, yes.
And I was a very desperate mum back in the early 90s. I had to create a product to help solve my daughter's unwanted hair problem. Right. And when I couldn't find it anywhere in the world, you know, I had to create it myself. So I turned my kitchen into a laboratory. And I became this mad scientist with no scientific qualifications, trialling and testing on my family members as lab rats. And one day I came up with this magic gel that put a smile on my daughter's face. To me, that was the end. Little did I know it was the beginning. But you know, Jack, sitting here talking to you right now, I'm sort of reflecting on the things that I had to do and the energy and the empowerment that I had to draw on to change that kitchen remedy into what it is today, a global brand, a product that's been used by millions of people around the world. Yes.
That is truly amazing and such an authentic brand origin. That's really incredible. How big is the business today? I mentioned some stats in the intro. How big is the business today?
Well, NADS was a phenomenon when it was first launched. However, NADS is not our company name. Actually, Sue Ismail and Daughters is our company name.
Yes.
So NADS is just one brand that sits under the corporate name, Sue Ismail and Daughters. And it's the only company in Australia that ends with and daughters,
I know.
by the way.
Yes.
Over the years, we have been entering other categories. So we have the Nitwits brand in the head lice category. We entered the supplementary category as well. And more recently, we acquired a product in the shampoo category. So we have many products and in many categories. And we have over 50 employees, both here and abroad. And yes, we do sell over $50 million through our retail partners around the world.
That is truly amazing. Now, so you mentioned it in passing. I think it's worth pausing on. Sue Ismail and Daughters is a genius name. It's as you say, it's the only business in Australia that ends with and daughters, so that's a problem. But what you've done there is absolutely genius and bold. Talk to us about how you see the innovation of that and why that was important to you.
I named the business Sue Ismail and Daughters because of the importance of my daughters in the business. They have been involved from day one. They still talk about the days that when they came back from school and the first thing that they did was went to the backyard garage and pack the product and get it ready for me to sell the next day. They accompanied me when I decided to launch the product on television. So, you know, they were my models, and today they have active roles in the business. My eldest daughter is the head of research and development. My middle daughter, Natalie, is in marketing, and Naomi is the head of design. So, you know, they play a huge role in the organisation. It's truly a family business, and without them, I don't know if I could have achieved what I've achieved today.
That is really inspiring, and as a fellow entrepreneur, that's incredibly refreshing to hear such an authentic story. How do you maintain your inspiration?
Well, you know, I love what I do, and I love the people that I'm surrounded with. And I do take care of myself, believe it or not. A few years ago, I was diagnosed with glandular fever, and it was going to turn into chronic fatigue if I did not take care of myself. So I've been doing yoga ever since. So yoga has revolutionised my life. You know, we do have to stop and switch off those tapes that are constantly running in our heads and really take care of ourselves. That's my inspiration. You know, we're an entrepreneurial organisation, so we're looking for problems to solve and offer the solution to the world, and I enjoy that. You've got to enjoy what you do.
And so just quickly before we go to break, are you coming back after the break as well to continue the conversation? NADS is 28 years old, as I mentioned in the introduction. What are you focused on next?
As I said, we're entrepreneurial, so we are never short of amazing ideas. My daughter, as the head of research and development, has abundance of ideas in the pipeline. We are known as natural, safe. You know, we put natural and safe and effective products on the market. However, you know, there's a skincare brand that we're working on. But I can't really give you any trade secrets. My daughters will kill me.
We do not blame you for that, and thank you for sharing your story with us thus far.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Time for another break. When we come back, now we chat with Danielle Robertson, founder of DR Care Solutions and a director of Family Business Australia. Joining her is our panel of experts discussing tips and tricks for running those family businesses.
You're watching Entrepreneurs. Welcome back to Entrepreneurs.
Welcome back to Entrepreneurs. We are joined by Danielle Robertson, founder of DR Care Solutions and a director of Family Business Australia. Sue Ismail is back, founder of Nad's Hair Removal, and David Kenny rejoins us to debate the ins and outs of keeping it in the family. Danielle, welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for having me here.
Not a problem at all. Thank you very much for being here. You've got an extraordinary background in the caring sector. Talk to us about what led to the creation of DR Care Solutions, your latest business.
Well, my mum started Dial an Angel in 1967, so that was our home care agency for helping people in the home and remain at home. It grew into the aged care and disability care sector. I grew up in the business. I was 6 weeks old when Mum started it. So I lived and breathed.
6 weeks?
I was 6 weeks, and I'm the third child.
You might have been the youngest entrepreneur in history.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but I think it was in the blood. My dad also ran menswear stores, and that was a family business as well. So coming out of the family business in 2014, we sold that then. There was a real need for people to have an independent person to help them navigate the aged care system and the disability care system. I found a niche that, and my kids who are involved in the business and my partner said, you've got to do this because no one is finding it easy to navigate the system, and I find the best care solutions for people's loved ones.
Right.
Whether it be retirement living or aged care facilities or home care.
Now, you're also a director of Family Business Australia. Now, we've spoken a lot tonight about there's an abundance of family business in Australia. How does that compare globally?
Well, to the rest of the world, there's 70% of all companies in Australia are family businesses.
Yeah.
In America, what we find is that most people's children go away to study and they learn and they grow up and they finish their education and then they find jobs in the areas that they've been at university for. In Australia, that's different. People are more or stay at home and they go to university, but they're living at home in Australia, and I think that's where they're living and breathing family business at the dining room table. So I think that's the difference. And the same in Europe. A lot of family businesses are in Europe, but once again, some of the kids go overseas to learn and they don't come back.
And does that reduce the percentage in those regions?
I think it does. I think it does.
Right.
But you know, I mean, Family Business Australia, we've got 2,000 members and that's growing rapidly. People don't know about it. It's the world's best secret in Australia.
Why is that?
I think family businesses are very private.
Yes.
They don't like to spout from the rooftops that we're a family business and we're doing great things. It is only when they become successful and the media gets hold of it, that's when people go, oh wow, they're a family business. And family businesses are trusted. Family businesses love doing business with family business, and they're trusted environment.
Yes. What are some of the key trends and issues that you see, particularly coming through Family Business Australia at the moment?
Look, there's always, with this massive generation of wealth being handed over to the next generation, so the second generation or the next geners, we're seeing that there's a lot of concerns around succession planning, exit planning, that the older generation don't want to let go. The younger generation want to fly ahead with innovations and ways of how they feel that they can do the business. I just think that the way of the future is, you know, having support from an association that can help with exit planning, accredited advisors, peer-to-peer support, networking with other family businesses, and hearing that we're all on the same page. We've all got the same sort of issues. Might be different industries, but we've all got different issues, or similar issues on that basis.
It's interesting you raise that dynamic, and David, I'd like your view on this. I would imagine a pretty common dynamic in family business is the older generation wants to bed things down and keep things bed down the foundations and de-risk it as much as possible. Whereas the up-and-coming generation will probably innovate and tech and bring it into the new era. Do you see that tension unfolding in a lot of family businesses?
Oh, very much so,
Yeah.
Jack. I mean, I think the key thing is really looking at making sure that that the whole family gets heard, because some of the reasons it's been successful have been old-fashioned values, but then wanting to expand overseas, and sometimes you can lose that thread of why it's been very successful. But equally well, we were talking before about Amazon and how things are coming at us, and needing to really look to bring in new business models and expand and drive down logistic costs and things like that. So it is a definite push-pull in terms of staying in the past and wanting to continuously innovate. So there's definitely a tension I see often.
And the older generation don't really want to let go. Because they feel that they've brought this baby into the world, this business, and have built it, and it's concerning for them, because what happens if they do hand it over? What are they going to do? And I work with families around this as well, talking about what their purpose is, and that they can do other stuff. They don't have to always be involved in the family business.
I think the older generation have to realise that thinking that what we did yesterday is sufficient for tomorrow is really ignorance. Like I've been running this business for 28 years, but my daughters have their own ideas, so I've got to welcome those ideas, and I've got to be open to change with market change. Online is big. It isn't my world, but it is my daughter's world. So yes, we've got to go in with our
social media and influencers. And
absolutely.
Yes.
The world has changed.
It's changing.
I'm interested to ask the whole panel of questions, so I might start with you. Quirkier characteristics we get in family businesses that you just wouldn't see anywhere else? I know this is probably very close to home for you.
I mean, I'm a grandmother now.
Congratulations.
And, well, I have been for a number of years. I'm a serial grandmother. But, as soon as my grandkids walk through that boardroom door, it's like, enough, that's it. My time's over. So I don't know if it can get any quirkier than that. My grandkids are more important to me at this point in my life,
yes,
only because I've handed the responsibilities to the right people in the organisation.
Yes. Danielle, quirky characteristics?
Well, I was breastfeeding at board meetings, so
wow.
my daughter was born and bred in that 2 weeks after I had her. She was with me in the office.
She's the youngest entrepreneur in history. She kept you by 4 weeks.
She did, something like that. So she's actually helping me in the business. She's a lawyer, but not lawyering, but she looks over all my contracts. And my son, he's in design, so he's involved in the business too. It's interesting to see how my mother and I used to talk about calling each other. I call her mum at home, but in the office I called her Dina. And people could not understand how I could decipher the difference between the home and workplace, and I never thought about it. It was just a natural occurrence. So that's not so quirky, but I think there's lots of things that happen in family businesses. I think the agility and having the ability to move very quickly is very different to the corporate world. So that's a really big plus for family businesses. So that if you see something coming from left field, you can, make sure that you adapt and change very quickly.
To finish, in broad strokes, David, a question for the entire panel, but to start with David, number one piece of advice for those considering going into a family business?
Assume it's going to fail and hope for the best and plan for the worst. So get the ground rules right in terms of making sure you know what's going to happen if there's a breakup. You want to be able to talk after all these sorts of things can happen. But also just set high standards and set rules about what's going to happen with, whose decisions, what areas people are going to have, responsibility over. Understanding, well, if there is someone has to exit, well, what are the ground rules? How do you objectively decide how this would be valued? How distributions will flow? Because it's really easy at the start if you have a chat with people about what is common sense. As soon as you're in an argument, it's another kettle of fish.
Yeah. Sue, number one piece of advice?
Yes, know what you want and work with that. believe in yourself, have the courage to get started, even if it is in a small way. One thing will lead to another, and before you know it, you're a proud owner of a huge business. Have the discipline to continue, because there's bound to be struggles and obstacles in the way.
Beautifully said.
And have fun, because life is too short.
I love that. Danielle, number one piece of advice to finish on.
Have clarity around your values as a family and as a business. I think that's really, really important. Understand your purpose. Why are you in business? What is it for? Is it just to make money? Is it what's your purpose? And it's very hard for a family business to identify that. Often they go to the founder and actually say, why did you start this? And the family don't realise. So, they're the things that, stand out to me.
Interesting territory indeed. David Kenny, Sue Ismail and Danielle Robertson, thank you so much for joining us on Entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for. Next week, we are at your service with Hospitality Entrepreneurs. You can watch us anytime on Foxtel Go and on the catch-up section of yourmoney.com.au. I'm Jack Delosa. Good night.